You have. In the wrong way. Ваши превъзходителства, Madam Secretary, does the simultaneous translation device work? It works. Wonderful. Ваши превъзходителства, госпожи и господа посланници, заместник посланник на Съединените щати, господа генерали, адмирали и офицери, членове на парламента и гости на Атлантическия клуб, преса. Много ми е драго, че имаме възможността днес да представим пред вас Дебора Ли Джеймс, която е 23-тия секретар на американските военновъздушни сили и тя е едва втората жена на тая позиция. Тя отговаря за делата на Министерството на военновъздушните сили, включително организиране, обучение, оборудване и осигуряване на своите почти 660 хиляди служители. Забележете, само в Министерството на военновъздушните сили има 660 хиляди служители на активна военна служба и разбира се за техните семейства. И тя надзирава правилното управление на, забележете, бюджета на американските военновъздушни сили, който е, да кажем, 140 милиарда долара годишно. 140 милиарда долара, това е един много добър бюджет и аз мисля, че българските военни бих се зарадвали дори на 1/10 от този бюджет. Госпожа Джеймс има 30 годишна служба в сферата на националната сигурност, в федералното правителство, в частния сектор. Преди настоящата си позиция е била президент на техническия инженерен сектор на САИК. САИК е една много впечатляваща организация. Тя не е така известна както са Coca-Cola или IBM или Microsoft, но когато за пръв път преди 20 на години се запознах с представител на тази организация и го попитах: твоята организация какво прави, какво продавате, той ми каза: ние продаваме решения. И аз попитах: решения за какво продавате? И той ми каза: ми решения за всичко. И аз съм много впечатлен, че днес имаме възможност в лицето на нашата лекторка да видим всъщност и предишен представител на тази организация. По време на администрацията на президента Клинтън между 1993 и 1998 тя е била помощник секретар на отбраната и отговаря за около близо 2 милиона служители по целия свят. Също така надзирава и бюджет около 10 милиарда долара. Както виждате, това е нашия лектор днес, е човек с изключителен опит в американската администрация, в американските военни дела и много се радвам, че нейната визита тук ще допринесе по някакъв начин за сближаване между българските военни и американските военни. Аз от много време съм преставал да крия, че една от визиите ми за развитието на въоръжените сили на Република България е нашите ВВС да бъдат оборудвани с F-16, може би защото това е единственият американски самолет, който съм имал възможност да пилотирам лично. С тези няколко думи искам да се обърна към вас, да приветстваме нашата спикерка Дебора Ли Джеймс, секретар по военновъздушните сили в Съединените щати. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Dr. Posse, for that very nice and warm welcome and introduction. Thank you also to the members of the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria, the members of the press who are in attendance here today. Most importantly, I want to say thank you to the people of Bulgaria for your strong friendship, the strong friendship that you always show to the United States. I am really, really delighted to be here. Before coming, I had the honor of meeting your new ambassador in Washington, Dr. Stoichev, who told me that Sofia is one of the oldest and one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. And I am here only briefly, and I've not seen the entirety of the city, but wow, what I have seen so far, he certainly was right about those comments. And of course, being here at the Central Military Club, that also is a huge, it's a huge cultural and iconic building in Sofia. Happy 25th anniversary, by the way, to the Atlantic Club. We certainly thank you for providing such an important forum for dialogue that shapes our thinking and educates all of us on the importance of the NATO alliance and the transatlantic relations that we share. The U.S. really values efforts like this one, efforts like this forum, so much so that, as you may know, every U.S. ambassador to Bulgaria delivers his or her first remarks right here at this very forum. Now, by way of background, I am here in Europe for about 10 days. I've just started my visit to Europe. I was in Lisbon, Portugal yesterday. The day before that, I was in Lajes in the Azores, had a very good visit in Portugal. I arrived here in Sofia this morning, and from here I will travel on to the 3 Baltic states, to the Ukraine, to personally witness some of the challenges that this region is facing. And beyond those states, I will then travel to several other locations, a total of 8 countries in 10 days. I came to Europe for a number of reasons. First, I wanted to see the many U.S. airmen who are forward deployed here in Europe, to be able to thank them personally for what they do to ensure peace and stability in the region, of course, in conjunction with our allies. Their presence demonstrates our long-standing commitment to Europe. And of course, I also want to thank the countries who are hosting them. Indeed, later today, I'll be meeting with several dozen of our U.S. airmen who are deployed here, training together with their Bulgarian counterparts, sharing their expertise, and strengthening our joint cooperation. My second reason for coming is to meet with senior military and government leaders in each of the nations to discuss specific areas of mutual cooperation, the defense challenges that we face together, and how we can deepen our relationships, work together more closely to counter some of the various serious threats that are right there on our doorsteps. Earlier today, in fact, I had the opportunity to meet with Defense Minister Nenchev, General of the Armed Forces Popov, Major General Radov, the Chief of the Air Force, and several other officials. This is a really timely period to be visiting Europe, to be visiting Bulgaria, in my opinion. As the US and Europe face a changing geopolitical environment, some observers around the world have said that the global influence of our transatlantic partnership is in decline. Well, I say they are dead wrong, and our president says they are dead wrong. We believe that the U.S. will remain Europe's closest partner, and that our defense cooperation, especially through NATO, will remain the foundation for solving some of our world's most pressing problems. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Specifically, I want to focus on 2 things. First, why I think our transatlantic defense cooperation is more relevant today than ever. The results of the just completed NATO summit, I believe, bear this out. And second, I want to discuss what the United States Air Force is doing in Europe in coordination with our allies to strengthen that overall relationship. First, just a little bit more background about my role in the U.S. defense establishment. As the Secretary of the Air Force, it's my job to provide the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States with military options that affect the air, space, and cyberspace domains. I'm responsible, just as Solomon said, for organizing, training, and equipping the Air Force, and very importantly, taking care of our airmen, both our military personnel and our civilian personnel and their families. I'm also the principal Department of Defense space advisor. This means I oversee all of the department's space matters. That means budget, it means policy, and it means strategy issues that affect space. And this is an important area given how much our military and our civilian populations rely on space capabilities to conduct many types of operations. For example, I'll just give you one example. The GPS, the Global Positioning System constellation. This is operated by our U.S. airmen. It is 40 satellites strong, 40 satellites in orbit, and it supports not only precision position navigation and timing, which is very important for our military users, but it also supports 3 billion civilian users worldwide. Today, U.S. airmen are providing 2/3 of America's nuclear deterrence. We're performing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, as well as strike missions in Iraq and Syria in the fight against ISIL. And of course, we're very focused on partnering with our European allies to reassure and ultimately to deter aggression that threatens all of us. In the 2.5 years that I have served in this current job, I have seen the demand for what we do in the Air Force continue to grow. It grows precisely because our world is so rapidly changing, more so than I can remember in the 30+ years that I have been working in defense. We're seeing threats that are more sophisticated, more diverse, and we're seeing these threats in each of our warfighting domains, meaning on the land, at sea, in the air, space, and in the cyberspace as well. And we're seeing disturbing behaviors from certain nation states and non-state actors as well. The bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is no single nation can solve today's and tomorrow's challenges alone, which is exactly why our transatlantic partnerships are more relevant today than ever. And NATO is the cornerstone, not just of transatlantic security, but in many ways, I believe it's the cornerstone for global security. And let me give you just a few examples. When the leaders of the NATO alliance met last week in Warsaw, they discussed at great length the alliance security posture in the face of what the communique of NATO ultimately called the arc of insecurity and instability along NATO's periphery and beyond. The NATO leaders acknowledged that the alliance faces a range of security challenges and threats that both originate from the east and from the south. Threats from state and non-state actors, from military forces, and from terrorist, cyber, and hybrid attacks. The leaders identified Russia as a source of regional instability that fundamentally challenges the alliance and damages Euro-Atlantic security. Equally important was the NATO leaders' declaration that the alliance does not seek confrontation with and certainly poses no threat to Russia. NATO will continue to be transparent, predictable, and resolute. However, and I think most importantly, NATO cannot and will not compromise on the principles and values on which the alliance and security in Europe and North America rest. The leaders declared that the alliance's essential mission is to ensure that the alliance remains an unparalleled community of freedom, peace, security, and shared values, including individual liberty, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. It is these same principles and values that inspired the historic transformation across all of Europe, including right here in Bulgaria a quarter of a century ago. And it's these same principles and values that underpin the strong partnership and the cooperation that we have today between the US and Bulgaria. Now, let me put this partnership and cooperation in a broader context. We're working together with Bulgaria and other allies to strengthen our capabilities, our plans, our posture, and our investments. In the case of the US, next year, the US will increase our funding for what we call the European Reassurance Initiative. The amount of money we will devote to this is $3.4 billion, which by way of comparison is 4 times larger than the amount we devoted to this program a year ago. The funds will be used to increase capability, readiness, and responsiveness of NATO forces through training and exercises, improved infrastructure, and the pre-positioning of US equipment in Europe. Airpower, which is my line, is certainly part of this mix. For the Air Force, this initiative has enabled us to deploy, for example, F-16s and A-10s here to Europe, as well as an F-22 training detachment. All of these things, of course, are on a rotational basis. Now, if we go back just 2 short years to the 2014 Wales Summit, the NATO allies at that point agreed to enhance the capabilities of the NATO response force in order to adapt and respond to emerging security challenges posed by Russia, as well as the risks emanating from the Middle East and North Africa. And in fact, NATO has increased its readiness by doubling the size of the NATO response force, and they stood up a very high readiness joint task force to facilitate the rapid movement of our response forces should that be needed. Now, let me just take a moment and give a couple of thoughts on the most recent summit, the one that just completed in Warsaw. First, the allies committed to strengthening NATO's defense and deterrence posture by enhancing our forward presence on the eastern flank, building upon that European reassurance initiative that I spoke about a moment ago. Second, NATO agreed that under the enhanced forward presence concept, 4 allies will deploy a battalion-sized unit to each of the Baltic states plus Poland. And as President Obama announced, the U.S. will take the lead in Poland, will deploy a battalion of American soldiers there. The United Kingdom will take the lead in Estonia. Germany will take the lead in Lithuania, and Canada will take the lead in Latvia. This ultimately will mean on the order of 4,000 additional NATO troops will be in the region on a rotational basis. Moreover, an additional U.S. Armored Brigade will rotate throughout Central and Eastern Europe, including in Bulgaria, and this will be an additional 4,000 U.S. troops that will come through for exercises and training. To the south, NATO expressed commitment to the security of the Black Sea area and committed to developing a tailored forward presence there, including a multinational brigade headquartered in Romania. Third, NATO is strengthening the readiness of its forces against a range of threats. For example, a major milestone was reached with the initial operating capability of the NATO ballistic missile defense, thanks to the progress that we've seen in Poland, Romania, and Spain. The allies agreed on the need to boost our intelligence sharing and early warning mechanisms so that we can improve our situational awareness and ultimately deter, prevent, and defend against hybrid threats, including cyber. And by the way, speaking of cyber, NATO recognized cyberspace for the first time formally as a domain of operations in which it must defend itself as effectively as it seeks to defend on the air, in the air, on the sea, and on the land. This means that cyber from here on out will be integrated into operational planning and alliance operations and missions. I think this is very, very critical. If you go back about 6 months, hackers who had possible ties to the Kremlin disrupted Ukraine's power grid and caused blackouts for hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. So at the summit, the allies made clear that the cyber defense pledge is to commit to enhancing their national networks and infrastructures so that we don't see a repeat of a situation like what occurred in the Ukraine. And the U.S. stands ready to help the allies build resilience to hybrid and new threats, including cyber. And lastly, NATO announced increasing its support to the Ukraine with a new assistance package to improve alliance support for Ukrainian forces. Now, all of these actions showcase NATO moving forward with the most significant reinforcement of our collective defense in quite a few years, since the Cold War. And the U.S. Air Force, to bring it back to my portfolio, is going to be a key component as we look towards implementing the commitments made in Warsaw, and we stand ready to support. Now let me shift just a few moments to a different type of threat. We're working closely with NATO members and other countries to address very important issues of terrorism and violent extremists. For example, you all know that we, the United States, are leading a coalition to deliver ultimately a lasting defeat to ISIL in the Middle East, and we are certainly thankful for the contributions from all of our NATO partners. Bulgaria has been part of this endeavor and has also contributed to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Earlier this week, our Secretary of Defense announced that the U.S. is going to deploy an additional 560 U.S. troops to Iraq to help the Iraqis establish a logistical springboard for their eventual offensive on ISIL's stronghold in Mosul, as we continue to help them take back more territories, more cities. U.S. troops, including airmen, will be part of this. They'll provide a range of support for Iraqi security forces, including infrastructure and logistical capabilities at a very critical airfield south of Mosul. As agreed in Warsaw, the ongoing crisis in Syria has direct ramifications for regional stability and for the security of NATO's southeastern border. And this conflict presents another source of challenges and threats for international stability, security, and prosperity. The alliance wholeheartedly condemned the unabated and indiscriminate campaign of bombardment, including the use of incendiary weapons, which do enormous damage, and the violence that the Assad regime and its supporters have wrought, which deliberately targets civilians and civilian infrastructure. But as made clear in Warsaw, NATO and the allies are committed to defending NATO territory and borders against any threats and address challenges emanating from the Syrian conflict, be they from governments or from terrorist organizations, including the Islamic State and the al-Nusra Front. In addition to Iraq and Syria, we have ongoing efforts, as you know, in Afghanistan. We're committed to proactively supporting Afghan conventional forces, and one of the ways will be in the future through additional Airpower, as well as training and advisory efforts on the ground and in the air. Bulgarian forces are also in Afghanistan in support of NATO's Resolute Support Mission, providing base security and protection in Kandahar, as well as staff in Kabul. At the Warsaw Summit, 39 states, including the United States, agreed to maintain on the order of 12,000 troops to NATO's Resolute Support, Advice and Training Mission in Afghanistan in the year 2017. And just last week, our President Obama announced maintaining the current U.S. presence in Afghanistan into next year with about 8,400 troops to continue training Afghan forces, as well as go after more aggressively, Al-Qaeda and ISIL. Now, I've talked about threats, and I think you'll agree we face quite a few. Let me now say just a few words about budget. We all know that security does not come for free. NATO has to have more and better equipped armed forces with the right balance of manpower and capabilities. And this means, above all, that we have to increase our defense spending. That's for all of us in NATO. Now, I'm not naive. I know this is no easy order. I can tell you it's no easy order in the United States either. We're all struggling with different budget priorities. And by the way, I want to thank Bulgaria for Bulgaria's commitment at the Wales Summit and the roadmap that Bulgaria has put together to reach the 2% commitment by the year 2024. An example, a very important example of Bulgaria's investment is Parliament's decision in June to modernize the fighter aircraft fleet in recognition of the need to protect Bulgarian airspace. And I would say, and I did say to the officials with whom I met earlier today, please, please keep pressing on this one because it's terribly, terribly important. Let me now turn to what the U.S. Air Force is doing in Europe. Last year, we supported on the order of 70 events that were tied to an exercise series called Operation Atlantic Resolve, and we are scheduled to participate in even more in the coming year. Here in Bulgaria, we recently completed 3 months of training and exercises with an F-15 squadron out of Massachusetts. And later today, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be seeing some of our U.S. personnel from a C-130 unit based in Germany who arrived earlier this week to start joint airlift training with the Bulgarian forces. Our F-15s out of Great Britain are certainly in constant high demand all over Europe, and we continue to commit B-2 and B-52 bombers to exercises here in Europe as well. Very importantly, I want to thank Bulgaria for the successful hosting of the Thracian summer exercises. These exercises and ongoing relationships help us maintain a credible and flexible and ready capability to respond to a variety of potential threats and situations. And more importantly than that, these exercises really help to professionalize our airmen. Your Chief of Defense, General Popov, and Chief of the Air Force, Major General Radev, told me personally earlier today how effective this sort of training has been in helping Bulgaria to sharpen skills, sharpen airmanship, and the Minister of Defense went a step farther. He said he thought it was very important to have these sorts of opportunities because when people come, they come as service members prepared to do their duty. But by the time they leave not only as service members, but they leave as friends. And you cannot surge trust and you cannot surge friendship. This has to be built over time. Let me talk about one final element of our cooperation, and that's joint professional military education of our air forces. We have a program called the Military Personnel Exchange Program, where we exchange our airmen in equivalent grades and specialties with allied nations, which then enhances our interoperability and our partner capabilities. It's an exchange program for military personnel. In short, this gives our U.S. airmen an opportunity to live in a foreign country and to work with an allied air force, and also allows a foreign exchange officer to come to the United States and work with our Air Force. We have this program ongoing with a number of nations around the world, but right now, today, we are working on an agreement to be able to have an exchange program with Bulgaria. So stay tuned. This is another form of cooperation that is coming. This kind of a program and others like them demonstrate that air forces are stronger and more effective when we learn together, when we develop leadership qualities together and skills together that contribute to the profession of arms. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the challenges that we face today mean that we can't take security for granted and we can't take air power for granted either. We must work together in close cooperation. And that's why our transatlantic partnership needs to remain strong. And very importantly, we must invest in security. As the NATO summit made clear, there's strategic value that unity brings to our alliance. The whole really is much bigger than the sum of its parts. I want to thank you again for inviting me here this afternoon, and I very much look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Actually, the first message is that NATO is in a good shape after the Warsaw Summit. NATO is fully operational and ready to meet the challenges. And a second news, which I would underline immediately after the Warsaw Summit, is that we, as if, changed the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty, which was signed in 1949. In this treaty, it is said that we protect the territory which is to the north of the Tropic of Cancer, which is the 23rd parallel. Now we go to the cyberspace. It is neither beyond, not to the south of this parallel, which means that we're operating in a totally new environment to which the old agreements are not that applicable. And I was very happy to see that you appreciated the 2% threshold, which the Bulgarian government is so wisely keeping. Имате думата за въпроси. Нашата гостенка беше така любезна да се съгласи да отговори на някои ваши въпроси, така че не се стеснявайте, но не се и бавете, защото тя е в стегната програма. Един млад момък в средата на коридора, една ръка виждам. Там виждам втора ръка на младата дама с очилата. Микрофоните.
Hello, 1, 2.
Това да не е на телевизията микрофона.
Madam Secretary, first of all, my name is Theodore Spasov. I'm member of the Bulgarian Student Society in Edinburgh, Scotland. And it's a real pleasure having you here today. Your presence here really reassures us that NATO is still strong and it still evaluates Bulgaria as a really important ally in the region. And since this is clear, I have two questions for you. After exercise and drills like Thracian Eagle and Platinum Lion that took place during last year and this year as well, how the American servicemen evaluate the Bulgarian effort in these exercises? Do they think that our force is capable of maintaining a strong defense of the region? Thank you very much.
Okay, another question?
Hello, my name is Yana Pravazova. I'm a student at American University in Washington, D.C. You already touched upon the issue of defense spending in regards to NATO, and I had the question of whether or not the U.S. will help to address the imbalance between the spending in between the different member states of NATO so that we may all reach the 2% threshold one day.
Okay, друга вдигната, any other, още една вдигната ръка? И още една вдигната ръка, two hands, I see.
Един не толкова млад задаваш въпроси. С голяма благодарност за присъствието при нас на този високопоставен гост, тази наша гостенка. Бих искал да задам един такъв въпрос, тъй като има известна дискусия в нашето общество, свързано с възможността да се подеме инициатива за демилитаризация на Черно море. Абсолютно съм убеден, че дисбаланс на силите в Черно море съществува и това, което бе взето като решение във Варшава за укрепване на източния фланг и югоизточния на НАТО е абсолютно правилно, за което сме и много благодарни. Същевременно тази инициатива появила се с началото на Черноморското икономическо сътрудничество, може би сега ще има някакво ново развитие, тъй като има стратегически характер. Възможно ли е такава една инициатива, разбира се, съгласувана с партньорите, да бъде направена и какво е вашето мнение за нейното развитие и приложимост? Благодаря.
Благодаря ви. И от този раунд последната ръка Томислава от Париж.
Hello, my name is Tomislava. I'm a student at the American University of Paris, and I wanted to ask you, since you're in charge of such a huge military organization, what inspirational message would you give to women who want to enter your field but are facing serious gender obstacles or challenges?
Do you want to apply for military service?
Maybe someday.
Okay, we shall support you, Madam Secretary.
Well, thank you very much for those questions, and I might come back and ask Dr. Posse to help me with one of the questions, and I'm not sure I fully understood, but let me address the ones that I understand and have something to say about. So the first question had to do with how do the U.S. forces evaluate the Bulgarian forces? Are they strong? How do they stand up, so to speak? So let me say that our U.S. forces have been very, very impressed with this is certainly true on the Air Force side, which is what I know best, but very impressed with the Air Force of Bulgaria. With that said, there's always room for improvement. There are modernization issues, there are readiness issues, and as I mentioned earlier, what we have learned, we invest a lot in our people, in their professional development, in building leadership skills. So we focus on this, and it's always good for Bulgaria to focus on this as well, which is why I emphasize the importance of the professional military education for the people. So we rate Bulgaria as a very effective Air Force, but as always, there's room to improve in some of these ways that I just talked about, and we want to stand with you and help as those improvements go forward. In terms of the imbalance that we as NATO members, we've all promised to reach the 2%. And some of us are already there. Some of us have a roadmap to get there over time. And some of us don't yet have that roadmap. And how do we rectify that? The only way I know how to do it, and it certainly is a message that I carry at every location where I visit, is we keep talking about it. We keep beating the drum. We keep reminding the partner nations that we do have treaty obligations, that we've made these promises to one another. And most importantly, we talk about the threats that we jointly face. To me, the threats tell the story. Now, the question is, how do we tell this to our populations? Because we're all dealing with budget struggles back home. I acknowledge this up front. A lot of my work involves working with our U.S. Congress to be able to secure the resources and the policy directives that we need to do our job as the United States Air Force. The only way I know how to do it is to work military to military, political authorities to political authorities, and keep talking about why are we doing this. We're doing this for our collective defense, the protection of the shared values, and we're doing it because we have these threats. And if we keep hammering home those themes, I believe we're going to continue to see steady improvement. And indeed, we have seen steady improvement over the last several years. It's just that we're not all there yet. Let me talk to the final question, and that has to do with what message would I give to young women who are interested in coming into a military career field, or for that matter, interested in coming into a career affecting national security issues. So perhaps it would be the diplomatic corps of your country or some other national security field. What I always tell young people, and by the way, I say this to young men as well as to young women, I've learned some important lessons in my life, and let me just share what they are. Number one is be prepared to change course and what I call zigzag in your life, because you will be surprised over and over again. You'll be surprised professionally. You'll undergo surprises that you never saw coming from a personal perspective with your family, your friendships. So be prepared to change course. Sometimes it's a fundamental change of course, and sometimes it's just a slight deviation in the change of course. But be agile, be open-minded enough to try new things, because even if it doesn't turn out exactly as you thought originally, that doesn't mean it can't be the best opportunity ever. So be prepared to zigzag, be agile. Another thing that I've learned is it's really important for a young person to be willing to seek out what we call in the United States a mentor. This is somebody who typically is somewhat older, who has done a job or had an experience that interests you. Go up to that person and ask them to spend some time with you, explain their story. What did they learn? What mistakes did they make? I've done this a lot. I have had many people who I call mentors in my life. It's helped a great deal. And those people also become part of your greater network and may introduce you to an opportunity or open a door for you down the line. So seek out mentors is another important area. My third lesson learned is be competent. So that means study, that means practice your trade, that means prepare to have a life of continual learning where you're always improving your competence. So that competency in whatever your field is very, very important. And I'll give you just one more. There's probably a group of 10 that I have. Actually, I want to give you two more. The next one is the importance of ethical leadership as well as ethical working, as well as ethics in your personal life. So in the Air Force, we talk about integrity. We talk about serving others before serving yourself. And we talk about excellence in all that we do. So I've seen many business authorities, I've seen political leaders, I've seen people throw away their ethics. And guess what? They bring themselves down and they bring down the good name of the organization that they serve. And so the importance of ethics is something that I always like to emphasize. And the final point I'll leave you with is communications. Communications, that is really important. So as a young person, being able to write concisely, effectively, persuasively, writing is a form of communication. As you advance up the leadership level, you will find that the verbal communication becomes increasingly important, and your relationships with people, and a lot of that is verbal. And then the part of communication, the final part that a lot of people forget about, but it's very, very important, and that is listening. Be an effective and active listener, because it will help you, particularly as a leader over time, understand where other people are coming from, and not only be able to make decisions based on the facts are very important, but so many of your decisions will relate to people. And having that empathy, having that understanding, I have found to be crucial. Now, Dr. Posse, could you help me? It was something about the Black Sea, but I didn't quite understand the fourth question.
This is domestic.
It's domestic, and I think you should answer it, Doctor. I think you should.
We had a large discussion in the press. I don't want to repeat it. I want to be generous to your visit to Bulgaria, not to spoil it with domestic politics. Well, I have one question. What is the tendency of using drones in the Air Force? And we saw now in Warsaw that a very interesting drone was demonstrated to serve all the 28 nations. And do we come closer to the moment in which the pilots will stay at their offices at home, and only drones will be doing the air job?
So I have to point out that we in the Air Force, we don't use that word drone. We use a phrase. The phrase is remotely piloted aircraft. Now let me explain why that's important. If you look the word drone up in the dictionary, it suggests that there's no humans that are involved, which in the remotely piloted aircraft world is flat out not true, because I need to tell you, there are quite a few very talented and effective humans on the ground. Not only the pilot, but there are operators of the sensors, there are intelligence analysts who receive the data and who make sense of it, understand what's going on, and so on. So anyway, just as a prelude, we call them remotely piloted aircraft. They are of increasing importance in our Air Force. I predict they're going to be part of our inventory for many years to come. I think they are here to stay. We are investing more in them. We're investing in the people. As I mentioned, people operate these, and there's quite a bit of analysis that is required. And what they have done is they have given us what I call an extra tool in our toolbox. They have been very effective in terms of gathering information. Information is power, as that old saying goes, and we're able to see more and be able to make better and faster decisions, in part because of that information. In addition to the gathering of intelligence, of course, these remotely piloted aircraft have also been used, some of them anyway, for strike missions. So they've been used along with our manned aircraft, which also have done strike missions. They have been able to go after targets in some of the recent conflicts, and they've proven to be effective. I am personally not one who believes that we're on the road to doing away with manned aircraft and somehow we'll just focus on these remotely piloted aircraft. I hear that from time to time. I personally don't believe it. I think it's going to remain an important part of our inventory, but right alongside of the manned aircraft.
Thank you very much. And one last round of questions. I think we have a few more minutes. Да, имаме още няколко минути. Има ли въпроси? Една вдигната ръка. Yes, we have a group of students coming from Germany, especially to attend this event.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I'm Christian Botz. I'm part of a group of students from Bonn, Germany, and we have the pleasure to be part of this event in a field trip, kind of field trip. And I would be interested which role the US expect Western European allies to play in the maintenance of security, for example, in the Black Sea region. Which role can they play? Which role should they play? Thank you very much.
Има ли друга? Заповядайте. Господин генерал.
Thank you very much, Major General, Sub-Retired Air Force. Mrs. Secretary, would you touch upon a little bit, very briefly, about the introduction of new technologies in the future Air Force projects of the United States? I suppose United States are working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Is there another question, or we shall leave the time to the Secretary to focus on these two? Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Williams, my name is Sangav Apostov. I'm a PhD student on NATO-Russia relations. But my question will not involve Russia. I like in the past, there were some Bulgarians who played a role in developing the US Air Force potential. Now I'd like to ask if there is a possibility for Bulgaria and the USA to develop a joint fighter or some other project involving Air Force. Thank you.
Or to be more specific, Bulgaria could be part in developing F-35 in future. Or 45, I don't know what is the next edition. Okay, that's it. Madam Secretary, you have the floor.
What role should the NATO allies play in the defense or the security of the Black Sea region? Well, first of all, the members of the Black Sea region, many of them are NATO allies, and so we have collectively responsibilities, all of us, for self-defense. That means if one is attacked, all of us go into the defense mode and to repel that sort of an attack. So to me, we all have responsibilities, whether you're talking about on the land, in the air, at sea, or now, as we mentioned very recently, it's formalized in NATO cyberspace. So we have to collectively work on all of these things. And that, again, that's one of the reasons why I'm here to talk about my portfolio of responsibilities. I'm not as qualified to talk about sea and land. I know a bit about that, but really what I'm here to talk about is the air component, which I say again, I'm very excited with the training, the exercises. I'm very pleased and grateful to see the investment commitment that has been made for the fighter aircraft. By the way, there's also been an investment commitment having to do with certain naval vessels. So all of this is very, very important, as is the 2%. The second question had to do with what sorts of new technologies are we looking at for the future. So there's a variety of new technologies. To state the obvious, we always want to stay, if we can, one step ahead of the competition. And so we're trying to think now, perhaps 10, 20, 30 years down the line, what does our force need to look like and what sort of new technologies would be most helpful. So we're investing in things like additional supercomputing power. So this would give us more ability to be able to make sense of many, many lines of data and to do it very, very quickly so that we could then make decisions more quickly and then feed those decisions out to the people who need to know. So that's the power of supercomputing. We are certainly investing in that. We're investing in technologies called hypersonics. Another way of thinking about hypersonics is how to go at ever increasing levels of speed, because speed can be a very affiliation. And the last one I will throw out is called directed energy. So this is the use of heat the use of laser technology, and what can be done with that for the future of our defensive needs. So that's just a sampling of some of the new technologies that we are exploring. And then in terms of down the line, are there co-production or projects that we can do together in the form of a new aircraft or a new something? And the answer is maybe. You never know. We have to see what the needs are down the line. To me, I just am so anxious to complete the F-35. It's hard for me to think about an F-45 or an F-55, but you know what? One day there will be a follow-on to those aircraft. It'll be beyond my years of service, but that will be coming at some point. And so the answer is maybe. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware that the F-35 program has been a very joint program. It's been joint in the sense that it is servicing our Navy, our Air Force, our Marine Corps, and it's joint because there are many other countries that have been involved, and their navies and air forces and so on. So it's a question for down the line. I think the most immediate focus is the training, the exercises, and some of the new investments that we have talked about here today.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. You mentioned the supercomputer, and this is another area in which we can try to find cooperation between United States and Bulgaria. May I inform you that during the communist time, Bulgaria was very much specialized in producing computers. When you are very close to Moscow, there are pros and cons, but this was the benefit from that we were allowed to produce computers. And really, Bulgaria developed a great know-how in this area. And I'm sure that the follow-up, however, not with the Ministry of Defense, rather with the Ministry of Education, would be very beneficial in this area. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I would like to especially thank the Secretary for the Air Force and the American Embassy in Sofia, Martina, Colonel, thank you very much for this great opportunity to follow up on the Warsaw Summit and try to inform the Bulgarian public on what's the news in the Bulgarian-American relations as far as the Air Force is concerned. Thank you.
Wrapped all in cellophane, designed for you. Tell you what it's all about.